On June 30th, Francesca Albanese, a UN-appointed Special Rapporteur, released a report called From Economy of Occupation to Economy of Genocide. Special Rapporteurs are independent experts appointed by the UN to monitor, report on, and advise governments about human rights situations worldwide. They play a vital role in raising awareness and driving change, often shining a light on issues that might otherwise go overlooked. The present report investigates the role of corporate entities in sustaining Israel's illegal occupation and its ongoing genocidal campaign in Gaza. Central to this analysis is the Israeli settler colonial logic of displacement and replacement, a system designed to dispossess Palestinians and erase their presence. Corporate actors, through their investments and partnerships, directly underpin this machinery. Despite long-standing knowledge of these violations, corporations have failed to exercise appropriate human rights due diligence. Instead, since October 2023, many have accelerated their engagement, becoming complicit in the destruction of Gaza and the mass displacement of Palestinians, including the largest displacement in the West Bank since 1967. The demands of the report are simple. Corporate complicity in human rights violations and war crimes must end, and those responsible must face legal consequences. But first, let's define the international legal and normative framework. In conflict zones, businesses are expected to observe heightened human rights due diligence. Liability is determined not just by intentions or compliance procedures, but by the actual human rights impacts of corporate conduct. Multiple international legal bodies, including the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, have clearly affirmed the illegality of Israel's occupation and annexation of Palestinian territory, the illegality of Israel's settlements, racial segregation, and resource exploitation, the opening of proceedings against Israel for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. These rulings make it clear that these companies must cut ties with any activity or relations that could support or profit from these violations. Failing to do so could result in companies being involved in violations to the right of self-determination, crimes of apartheid and genocide, the crime of aggression, and ancillary crimes and human rights abuses. Now let's define what some of the technological aspects these tech companies are providing. Cloud computing is like a water company for computers. Instead of building your own well and plumbing and having to manage all your pipes, you can just turn on the tap for water. When your computer needs power, storage, or processing, the cloud delivers it instantly, on demand, through its remote servers, which are giant computer and data centers that you access via the internet. Artificial intelligence, on the other hand, is a super smart computer program that recognizes patterns in huge amounts of data. For example, if I showed this program 1,000 pictures of cats and dogs, it'll eventually be able to recognize patterns in future images to tell them apart. AI does the same thing on a faster and massive scale. It learns from data to make predictions or decisions. But who are these corporate actors called out by the Special Rapporteur? Major US tech firms such as Amazon, Alphabet, the parent company of Google, and especially Microsoft are deeply entrenched in Israel's occupation through its surveillance and military infrastructure by providing cloud and AI products. For Microsoft, this relationship can be tracked back as far as 1991. Microsoft's Research and Development Center in Israel is its largest outside the US, and there are documents that show Microsoft personnel working closely with units in the Israeli army to develop products and systems. Microsoft's research is directly used to oppress, displace, and murder Palestinians. Its technologies are embedded throughout Israel's public and private sectors, including in prisons, police, and military operations, and more within internationally recognized illegal settlements. Since the early 2000s, Microsoft has steadily integrated its civilian and enterprise technologies into Israeli military infrastructure, while acquiring numerous Israeli cybersecurity and surveillance startups. These integrations have made Microsoft a critical enabler and profiteer of the surveillance state and the militarized control of Palestinians, reinforcing settler colonial domination. In fact, dozens of units in the Israeli army have purchased services from Microsoft's cloud computing platform, Azure, since their most recent genocidal campaign against Gaza began, including units across the air, ground, and naval forces, as well as the elite intelligence squad, Unit 8200. Microsoft has also provided the military with extensive access to OpenAI's GPT language model, the engine behind ChatGPT. Despite growing awareness and condemnation, Microsoft continues to profit from and enable a system that the International Court of Justice has linked to genocide, apartheid, and crimes against humanity. In doing so, Microsoft has not only failed to uphold its human rights responsibilities, it has become materially complicit in the machinery of occupation and destruction. So you may ask, why does this continue? The genocide persists because it is profitable. The Israeli occupation functions as a testing ground for arms and surveillance tech, which are in boundless demand, have minimal oversight, and high profit margins. Public institutions, investors, and corporations are all financially enmeshed in this system of apartheid and militarism. The report underscores that had appropriate due diligence been applied, these corporate relationships would have ceased long ago. Their continuation reflects not only the negligence but active profiteering from the suffering and oppression of the Palestinian people. Which brings us to what needs to be done. Corporate liability under international law is clear. International humanitarian and criminal law apply to both states and non-state actors, including corporations and their executives. The UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights outline a continuum of involvement and establish that due diligence alone does not absolve a corporation of liability. Corporate entities may be held liable if their activities directly cause violations, facilitate or enable third-party abuses, and provide material support with actual or constructive knowledge of ongoing crimes. Complicity can take form of moral support, logistical or financial assistance, or helping create the conditions necessary for atrocities. This liability even applies in the absence of the intent to harm. The Nuremberg legacy affirms that economic actors can be criminally responsible for enabling war crimes and genocide. Corporations have been on notice for decades regarding violations in occupied Palestinian territories. The ICJ's finding and the Rome Statute make it clear. The occupation constitutes aggression, and supporting it amounts to complicity in international crime, and any engagement with Israel must account for the illegality at the heart of the occupation, not just the humanitarian impacts. So Microsoft and other corporations must ask, 1. Do our products, services, or activities contribute to human rights violations? 2. Do we increase the risk of such impacts? And 3. Are our actions sufficient in and of themselves to result in harm? If the answer is yes, corporations are legally obligated to cease these actions, provide remedies and reparations, and withdraw completely and unconditionally. In fact, the Special Rapporteur calls for an urgent action. Member states must impose full sanctions and an arms embargo on Israel, including dual-use technology and heavy machinery. Domestic and international courts must investigate and prosecute complicit corporate executives, and corporations must disengage from the Israeli economy and occupation-related infrastructure until apartheid ends and reparations are made. The devastating reality is clear. The ongoing genocide and displacement in Gaza continues not only because of political will, but because of the profitable corporate complicity. Tech giants like Microsoft have become deeply embedded in the machinery of occupation, providing the tools, infrastructure, and expertise that enable surveillance, control, and destruction on a massive scale. This is not just a matter of business or technology. It is a profound human rights crisis fueled by corporate interests that profit from apartheid and war crimes. The legal frameworks are unequivocal. Corporations that contribute to or enable these violations bear responsibility under international law. Ignorance or due diligence is no longer an excuse, and active accountability and meaningful actions are imperative. The path forward is clear. Corporations must immediately cease all operations and investments that support the occupation and violence. In the 1980s, Microsoft made a principled stand against apartheid by terminating its business operations in South Africa. The company explicitly cited the South African government's insistence on apartheid as incompatible with its values and human dignity. At the time, Microsoft went a step further by donating the profits from its South African sales to anti-apartheid efforts and earned praise from human rights advocates for its moral clarity. The same standard must be now applied to Israel's apartheid system, as recognized by multiple human rights organizations and increasingly by international legal bodies. If Microsoft's leadership once believed the apartheid in South Africa was untenable, the same must hold true for the Israeli government's policies of racial segregation, military occupation, and systematic displacement of Palestinians. Governments must enforce sanctions, arms embargoes, and legal prosecutions. If Microsoft does not stop its support for the brutal occupation and genocide, it and its executives must face legal consequences. The global community must demand that justice and human rights guide every business decision connected to this conflict. Ending corporate complicity is not just a step towards peace. It is a necessary move towards justice, dignity, and the restoration of Palestinian rights. Together, through awareness, advocacy, and action, we can hold those responsible to account. The time to act is now. Visit noaa.cc to see what you can do to get Microsoft to commit to no Azure for apartheid.